From the New Arts and Media Studios in Milwaukee, I'm Charles Burcell. This is The Log. With a tip of the hat today to Neil Young, the great Neil Young, singer-songwriter. Let me read from Rolling Stone magazine. Neil Young posted a since-deleted letter to his management team and record label, demanding that they remove his music from Spotify. I am doing this because Spotify is spreading fake information about vaccines, potentially causing death to those who believe the disinformation being spread by them, he wrote. Please act on this immediately today and keep me informed of the time schedule. I want you to let Spotify know immediately today that I want all my music off their platform, he continued. They can have Rogan or Young, not both. Young is referencing the steady stream of misinformation about vaccines that Joe Rogan has peddled on the Joe Rogan Experience. Last month, 270 doctors, physicians, and science educators signed an open letter asking Spotify to stop spreading Rogan's baseless claims. Well, I just, for one, want to put my full support behind Neil Young. This is absolutely the right thing to do, and it's the right way to do it. Now, some of you might be yelling, cancel culture. Well, no, let's get clear about something here. Neil Young is doing exactly the right thing. The first thing you do is you refuse to participate in the bad thing. You know, I'm not going to share an office with this person. I'm not going to work at your company. I'm not going to cooperate and be a party to something I find morally abhorrent. That's perfectly within your right. And I'll go so far as to say it's your duty. It's not cancel culture. It's not being, God, I promise never to use this word. It's not being woke. It's just being a decent person. Now you'll notice he's not necessarily demanding that they fire Joe Rogan. He's saying you can have one or the other, and you choose. And if it's going to be him, then I'm gone. It's all on him. It's his decision. This is the right way to do it. All of us should do this. We should be living a slow-rolling boycott every day, in that if you don't like a certain company or corporation or what they do, you don't do your business there. If you're working for a company that you find morally reprehensible, you get yourself out of that situation. Now, I know. I'm thinking ahead here. Everybody can't just up and quit their job. I understand that. But you do what you need to do. And if you can find a way to get out of that situation, you can't just rationalize and say, well, okay, that's the world, and just give up. No, everybody needs to be Neil Young today. Be like Neil, is what I'm saying. I've heard people invoking the First Amendment in this debate about Neil Young and Spotify and Joe Rogan. And I'm kind of really dismayed that it still comes down to that. People really just don't understand. We can make the same argument over and over again, and people refuse to hear it. The First Amendment means that the government can't stop you from talking. The government can't put you in jail. The First Amendment has nothing at all to do with private companies, with private individuals. If you say something using your right of free speech, you might very well get blowback from anybody. From friends, from relatives, from strangers, from the social media community, from your job, from your church. If you say something really reprehensible, you're going to get blowback. There's going to be a cost. Has nothing to do with free speech. So if Spotify was taking my advice, let's all be like Neil, let's all act on our own standards, they would drop Joe Rogan like a hot potato. I mean, don't you have any standards? You're going to allow this kind of bile to be on your platform? And Neil Young is right. People are literally dying every day because of this misinformation, because of these lies. So don't come at me with First Amendment. I believe in the First Amendment. I believe the government shouldn't hammer down on free speech. But I'm fine with consequences within the free market of ideas. I'm fine with that. All right, let's talk about cancel culture a little more generally here. Here's what I consider real cancel culture, and it's very much related to what I was just talking about. Private folks in their private lives can have all sorts of opinions. You can boycott a store, boycott an artist because you don't like where they are, you don't like what they're saying. That's all fair game in the free market of ideas. I'm fine with that. But when the government starts trying to control speech, controlling ideas, now all you people who cry First Amendment, where are you? Especially folks who lean more center and to the right, because we got some real serious cancel culture happening, real dangers to the First Amendment. And it's happening virtually in every red state. State legislatures have gone out of their minds. A few examples. Florida School District. They canceled a civil rights lecture over critical race theory concerns. So this is the government stepping in and controlling speech. Not only controlling it, canceling it. You guys are right-wingers who cry about cancel culture. This is it. A Florida school district, reading from NBC News right now, a Florida school district canceled a professor's civil rights history seminar for teachers, citing in part concerns over critical race theory, so-called, even though his lecture had nothing to do with the topic. J. Michael Butler, a history professor at Flagler College in St. Augustine, was scheduled to give a presentation Saturday in Osceola County School District teachers called the Long Civil Rights Movement. I don't know. You think that's worthy of, of being taught in history classes? The civil rights movement, generally? Okay. Which postulates that the civil rights movement preceded and post-dated Martin Luther King Jr. by decades. All right. I suppose historians can debate, and that's what people do in academic circles, including historians. Well, where do you set the beginning point and the end point of the civil rights movement? Does it begin and end with Martin Luther King? Well, according to Professor Butler, no. And he was going to give a seminar on this. He said that he was shocked to learn why the seminar had been canceled through an email Wednesday, but that he wasn't surprised because educators feel increasingly intimidated over teaching about race. Less than 24 hours before Butler was informed of the cancellation, a state Senate committee advanced legislation at the behest of Republican Governor Ron DeSantis to block public schools and private businesses from making people feel quote-unquote discomfort when they're taught about race. DeSantis also wants to empower parents to sue schools that teach critical race theory. There's a climate of fear, an atmosphere created by Governor Ron DeSantis that has blurred the lines between scared and opportunistic, Butler said in a phone interview. The victims of this censorship are history and truth, Butler said. The end game is they're going to make teaching civil rights into critical race theory, and it's not. All right, so if you're concerned about so-called cancel culture, and if you're a great defender of the First Amendment, well, then where are you on this? Conservatives, this is cancel culture. And I love that he's taking a page out of his buddy Greg Abbott, governor of Texas, his playbook, where this proposed law would allow private citizens to sue, just like the horrible abortion law in Texas. You want other examples? I could go for hours and hours with examples. Here's another one. Also from Florida. The so-called Don't Say Gay bill is moving forward in the state legislature. This reading now from ABC News. A Florida bill that would limit classroom discussions on sexual orientation and gender identity and encourage parents to sue schools or teachers that engage in these topics is speeding through the state House and Senate. It's being called a Don't Say Gay bill by LGBTQ advocates who fear that if this bill is signed into law, it could act as a complete ban on the lessons on LGBTQ oppression, history, and discussions about LGBTQ identities. Chasten Buttigieg, activist and husband of U.S. Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg, denounced Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and the state legislature for the efforts. He tweeted, "This will kill kids, Ron DeSantis. You are purposefully making your state a harder place for LGBTQ kids to survive in. In a national survey at Trevor Project, 42% of LGBTQ youth seriously considered attempting suicide last year. Now they can't talk to their teachers?" Yeah, you want to talk about cancel culture? This is cancel culture. Paul Krugman had a good column this past week. Americans like to think of their nation as a beacon of freedom, and despite all the ways in which we have failed to live up to our self-image, above all the vast injustices that sprang from the original sin of slavery, freedom, not just free elections, but also freedom of speech and thought, has long been a key element of the American idea. Now, however, freedom is under attack on more fronts than many people realize. Everyone knows about the big lie, the refusal by a large majority of Republicans to accept the legitimacy of a lost election. But there are many other areas in which freedom is not just under assault, but in retreat. Let's talk in particular about the attack on education, especially, but not only in Florida, which has become one of America's leading laboratories of democratic erosion. Republicans have made considerable political hay by denouncing the teaching of critical race theory. This strategy has succeeded even though most voters have no idea what that theory is, and it isn't actually being taught in public schools. But the facts in this case don't matter because denunciations of CRT are basically a cover for a much bigger agenda, an attempt to stop schools from teaching anything that makes right-wingers uncomfortable. Then there's the teaching of science. Most high schools do teach the theory of evolution, but leading Republican politicians are either evasive or actively deny the scientific consensus, presumably reflecting the GOP base's discomfort with the concept. Once the Florida standard takes hold, how long will teaching of evolution survive? Geology even has the same problem. I've been on nature tours where the guides refuse to talk about the origins of rock formations, saying that they've had problems with some religious guests. And then there's economics, which these days is widely taught at the high school level. Given the long history of politically driven attempts to prevent the teaching of Keynesian economics, what do you think the Florida standard would do to teaching in my home field? Again, this is Paul Krugman writing. Did I mention that DeSantis also wants to create a special police force to investigate election fraud? Yeah, we talked about that the other day. Like the attacks on critical race theory, this is obviously an attempt to use a made-up issue, voter fraud is largely non-existent, as an excuse for intimidation. Okay, I'm sure that some people will say that I'm making too much of these issues, but ask yourself, has there been any point over, say, the past 5 years when warnings about right-wing extremism have proved overblown and those dismissing those warnings as alarmist have been right? There you go, some of Paul Krugman's essay from this past week. Yeah, this is what the Republicans are up to. This is cancel culture. And like you, I'm tired of talking about them, but we absolutely have to stay on top of this. I'm sure I'm not going out on a limb here when I say there's a very real possibility that the Republicans are going to take over both the House and the Senate in 9 months' time. There's a very good chance they might take the presidency in 24. They're already having great success in state houses and in governor's mansions. All of these I'm here in Wisconsin, and just this week, they were working on legislation for concealed carry. They want the age limit to go from 21 to 18. They want 18-year-olds to be able to legally own guns and conceal carry. And they also want to expand the areas. They want to make sure that it's legal to carry in schools, in churches, just pretty much everywhere. So the effect of this law would be quite literally to allow 18-year-old high school seniors to take loaded guns to school with them and conceal them. This is where the Republicans in Wisconsin are. Now, luckily for the moment, we have Governor Evers, a Democrat, so none of these things have a chance. But he's up for re-election in 9 months, and the most likely Republican candidate is a full-blown Trumpster who's just going to sign off on all of this stuff. Critical race theory, guns, abortion, all of it. Just right on down the list. Voter suppression, of course, right on top of the list. You know, Joe Biden had one really good line from his press conference. When he looked at America and he said, "What are Republicans for?" And it was an excellent little soundbite and an excellent question. And I searched out because, all right, he asked the question, who's going to answer it? And I found some responses. And I think the responses really answer the question. What are Republicans for? Kevin McCarthy responds to Joe Biden. This is from Newsweek. At a press conference on Wednesday afternoon, so last week, President Joe Biden acknowledged that major legislation had stalled and lamented the GOP's effort to block his agenda. Biden conceded he would have to pare back his Build Back Better plan, but said he was confident he could get big chunks of the spending package signed into law before the midterm elections later this year. You and I talked about that. I'm not so confident. I don't know how anything passes this year. I hope he's right and I'm wrong. I really do. Anyway, continuing here. Biden also criticized Republicans for uniting against his proposals. Quote, "I did not anticipate that there'd be such a stalwart effort to make sure that the most important thing was that President Biden didn't get anything done," he said. Lord, okay, let's not get back into that. That's the dumbest thing he said. I think it's maybe the dumbest thing he's ever said, and he said a lot of dumb things. He didn't anticipate that there'd be such a stalwart effort to make sure that his agenda didn't pass? He didn't anticipate that from the Republicans? All right, that's not what we're talking about right now. Good Lord, that's the dumbest thing anybody's ever said. But he followed that up with the best thing he said. Think about this. What are Republicans for? What are they for? Name me one thing they're for. Okay? So he went from the worst thing to the best thing without taking a breath. So that's a great question. All right. Here's McCarthy. On Sunday then, the following Sunday, I guess it was on one of the talk shows. Oh, no, it's in a tweet. He posted about 11 a.m. Okay. "I heard President Biden ask repeatedly, what are Republicans for? I'll happily answer," McCarthy wrote. Okay, listen to this. This is his tweet. "The Constitution, kids in schools, safe streets and a secure border, an economy that keeps food on the shelves, holding Biden's failed administration accountable." That's the best Kevin McCarthy could come up with. And I dare say that's the best any Republican could come up with. Okay, who's not for the Constitution? Everybody's for the Constitution. Kids in schools. It's unanimous. Everybody's for kids in schools. This is just this little sort of generalized, innocuous list of good things. Safe streets and a secure border. Of course. An economy that keeps food on the shelves. Of course. Holding the administration accountable. Yeah, you and the entire press corps and the entire world, any person would agree with this list. This is a nothing list. He's saying absolutely nothing. These are just platitudes. When the president asked what you're for, and what I'm asking right now is, how do you plan on accomplishing these things? What are your policies? What are your initiatives? Because all you're showing us is the big lie and all this Republican-styled cancel culture. And you want more guns on the streets. I mean, what are you for? We can see by your actions, by what you're actually doing in state legislatures, we can see that. We can't really see anything from the congressional level because you literally have no initiatives. You just want to obstruct anything the Democrats put forward. So what are you for? We're still asking. Newsweek continues here with Republican Iowa Senator Joni Ernst, who also offered an answer during an appearance on CNN. Generally speaking, I understand the politics. Midterms tend to be a referenda on the people who are running the country, host Jake Tapper said. But what are 3 things that Republicans will do if you recapture the Senate in the midterms? Excellent question. Give me 3 things the Republicans will do if you recapture the Senate. That's a pretty straightforward question. Well, here's Joni Ernst. Quote, Republicans stand for a strong, free, and prosperous nation. Lord help me. So, 1, we need to tackle the issue of inflation, she said. Okay, you want to tell us how you're going to do that? Let's find out here. Continuing her quote, Biden is facing a 40-year high with the inflation rate, and Iowans and all Americans are feeling those pressures. So alleviating those pressures on our families would be job number 1. Okay, yeah. You think nobody else is concerned with inflation? He asked you how you would do it. He asked you, let me repeat. Good question by Jake Tapper. What 3 things will you do if you recapture the Senate? Being against inflation is not doing something. Joni Ernst, also listed tackling COVID-19. And here's her quote to Jake Tapper, asking her again, what would you do? Well, here's what she says. We need to make sure that American families have access to testing, but certainly we want to make sure that they are getting their children back into school and that their workplaces are safe and they can return to work. Every single person in this country, right, left, center, Republicans, Democrats, independents, radicals, centrists, find me one person who disagree with that. You're not saying anything. Yeah, we need testing. Yeah, we want kids in schools. Yes, we want workplaces that are safe. How will you do it? What will you do? That was the question. We're seeing a trend here. The question is still unanswered. What are Republicans for? Continuing. And then as well, we need to focus on additional things like, foreign relations with our allies. Oh, boy, wow, bold. What a bold statement. Because obviously with national security, we are under a lot of pressure right now. Really? No kidding. So Republicans believe in peace through strength. Wow. Thanks for being specific, Joni Ernst. I certainly believe that bolstering our military, but also making sure that we're using all the other tools in our toolboxes to repair fractured relationships with other nations, engaging in trade, all of those things, that's what Republicans stand for. That's what I stand for. Is she serious? Is she punking us? Is this a prank? Does she really think we're that stupid? Or is she that stupid? Either she's the stupidest person in the world, or she thinks you're the stupidest person in the world. I don't know how you find a third option there. Because if she believes this stuff, she should be institutionalized. If she really believes that that's an answer, or the other side of that coin, she knows it's a load of BS, and she thinks you're that stupid. Tell me if there's a third option here. I don't see it. So this is what Republicans are for. I like the way Newsweek closes out this article. Ahead of Biden's press conference, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell had been asked by an NBC reporter what the GOP's policy agenda would be if the party takes back control of Congress. His answer, "Oh, that's a very good question, and I'll let you know when we take it back." What a scumbag. With his little smirk. Well, that's a very good question. I'll let you know when we take it back. So he just flat out refuses to answer the question. But he suggests that, oh yeah, we definitely have an agenda, but I'm not going to tell you until you put us in power. Then I'll tell you. Yeah, maybe we're finally going to see the Republican health plan. What a f***ing joke. We gotta, I said, I take no pleasure in this. But you have to understand who these people are. And as we speak, there are 30 state legislatures controlled by Republicans. And they're all doing this stuff. They're all doing it. They're all doing CRT. They're all doing guns. They're all doing abortion. They're all doing voter suppression. They're all doing anti-LGBTQ. All of them. I'll give you one more example that sort of epitomizes the whole problem. In fact, that's the headline from Washington Post opinion by James Downey. Kristi Noem personifies the Republican Party's problem. Her state is well above the national average in COVID-19 deaths per capita, and she's had, from the very beginning, just a full open policy. She's deployed her National Guard to the southern U.S. border. Again, this is Kristi Noem of South Dakota, not anywhere near the southern border. So she ignored all convention and probably the Constitution by doing that. She was also a guest on one of the Sunday talk shows. She lied about abortion and bragged about the heartbeat law that she's proposing in her state. And as justification, she said that 71% of Americans believe there should be some reasonable restrictions on abortions. Yes, that's true. But of that 71%, a tiny fraction, the polls tell us, are in favor of the kind of draconian bill she's talking about. So she has no trouble lying. She has no trouble being an extremist when it comes to right-wing red meat issues. And she has no trouble lying about them. She lied about COVID. At the time she was speaking, hospitalization rates were up 9%. She said they were going down. So they have no trouble. They look right in your eyes and lie to you. They don't care. Noem is at the forefront of bigotry against transgender women and girls and brags about it. Reading now from the essay, any interview with a politician will be some mix of talking points and actual policies. But with Noem, the dial is all the way over toward the first. This approach is similar to that of Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin, another GOP star who sticks to sound bites over solutions. Indeed, Noem echoes not just Youngkin, but other Republican presidential hopefuls such as Senator Ted Cruz, former Vice President Mike Pence, and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. In all cases, the policies and principles don't really matter. What matters is Republican voters' approval. There are many reasons Donald rose to prominence in the past decade, why this wannabe authoritarian easily took over one of the two major parties and just as easily has held on despite losing re-election. Noem and Youngkin, Cruz, DeSantis, and so on, personify a key factor that gets lost in the shuffle. The party's most prominent figures are willingly empty vessels in thrall to the GOP base. Until that changes, the GOP will stay the party of And while they remain there, and while they hold power in 30 state legislatures, and while they have the potential to take over the House and the Senate and the White House, we are going to be paying very close attention to what they say, and more importantly, to what they do. All right. Next time we speak, I'll go out of my way to find something more pleasant to talk about. I love you. I'm Charles Purcell.